Annenberg Media.
The National Endowment for the Humanities, and the National Science Foundation. In El Salvador, a bulldozer accidentally strikes the remains of an ancient settlement, and deep below the surface, archaeologists open a time capsule 1,400 years old. Here, in a broad valley in central Mexico, stand the ruins of what was once the largest city in the New World. Beneath an intricate complex of dwellings, archaeologists are uncovering startling evidence of family life. And in Italy, as archaeologists explore the ruins of Pompeii, new investigations shed light on the nature of the Roman family and the surprising role of slaves. Who do we live with, and why? What can these ancient families tell us about our own families? Around the world, archaeologists are looking far beyond the palaces and temples, into the households of common people, bringing families to life out of the past.
Come forward all the way. That's good. Now go ahead, Randy. Come forward.
Ease the baby out with little pushes.
You can do it.
Beautiful. The baby's coming up to you.
Every newborn child immediately confronts three basic needs: food, shelter, and education. In the beginning, these needs are met at home. But in industrial societies, that soon changes. We educate our children in schools.
Okay, you're getting this too a little mixed up from the example before.
We earn our daily bread in offices, and we buy it in markets. But in many cultures, the household is still the most basic unit of society, where people spend most of their days producing what they need to live and teaching their children their values and culture. Anthropologist Richard Wilk.
A household is an activity group. It's a group of people who work together, who consume together, who take part in all the activities of everyday life. It's a unit of people cooperating and sharing, putting money together, putting work together, taking care of children, living under a single roof.
What makes households so different from culture to culture? Archaeologists are looking for patterns in the past. Their search takes us back to a time when the home was the center of society, protected by the god of the hearth. These are the ruins of the ancient Maya, who flourished from the time of Christ to AD 900. At their height, Maya settlements spanned southern Mesoamerica, from the Yucatan in the north to El Salvador in the south. The Maya left behind dozens of cities, marked by tall pyramids and imposing statues. These remnants offered a portrait of the Maya elite. But archaeologist Payson Sheets was seeking a broader picture.
We want to deal with the common people, the people who are doing the farming, who are making the pottery, who are doing the work for supporting society. And it's about time we know something about them, how they lived. Were they really exploited? Were they living lives of desperation, just barely eking out an existence under the oppressive machinery of an exploitative government? Or were their lives fairly rich? Did they have things of beauty in their houses? How did they live? Did they have a variety of foods stored in their houses? Were they scrunched into scuzzy little spaces, or did they have some open areas and a comfortable life? That's what we're working on.
Sometimes an archaeologist's search is helped by accident. In El Salvador, a bulldozer digging a foundation for a grain silo stumbled upon an old house. Could this be the evidence that Sheets was looking for?
People in the area had seen well-preserved floor, good artifacts on the inside, thatch roof collapsed down onto the floor, but perfectly preserved. They all thought it's a recent house under a recent volcanic eruption. When I came here, I thought exactly the same thing. But being curious about things, I decided I'd like to know what it dated to. So pulling out my trusty trowel and scraping along the floor right along here, I found some pieces of pottery. But the pieces of pottery were all prehistoric, classic period pottery. I was looking for a Coke bottle, a piece of plastic, some tin foil, something to give me an idea what the date of the structure was. Only prehistoric pottery. So immediately I perceived a powerful opportunity to really embarrass myself professionally by saying, whoa, it's prehistoric, it's fantastic, total preservation. Decided a little bit of caution here before doing that and submitted a series of thatch samples for radiocarbon dating, and they all came back with an age of about 1,400 years.
In Suren, El Salvador, archaeologists had stumbled upon a rare find. A building made from mud and thatch that should have disintegrated centuries ago. Yet here it was. How could it have been preserved for so long? The 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens provides a picture of what happened in Suren 1,400 years ago.
You'd hear a big explosion because it happened all at once, and you'd see a huge black cloud coming at you. When it hit you, it would hit with the temperature of boiling water, so it would actually scald the skin, and your first deep breath would be your last breath.
Day after day, the volcano at Suren spewed tons of searing ash across the countryside. Everything within 5 kilometers was buried beneath the ash. The homes of the Maya were destroyed. Ironically, their way of life was preserved.
People didn't abandon their things, they left things exactly where they'd placed them, and we have an opportunity to study people, their individual activities, what they did, their successes, their failures, their frustrations. And so it's an opportunity to study people and families like we've not had before in this area of the New World.
In a test pit, the team looks for buried structures. Do still more houses lie beneath the sugarcane? After days of digging, the test pit is 3 meters deep. The workers have found a large piece of wood. It may be the remains of a roof timber.
¿Qué han encontrado? ¿En la esquina? Ahí nomás. Algo grande.
Using the test pit method, the team finds evidence of at least 7 buried structures.
Right there.
Have you found evidence for those trees?
Full excavation begins. Slowly, meticulously, the team begins to remove the volcanic ash. Weeks later, the ancient floors emerge, yielding the first clues of how these rooms were used.
So anyway, we're really glad to find this. It's certainly not any one of your super elegant, towering pyramids like a Tikal, but for our purposes, super important to know where they actually did their cooking. They've got round bottom pots, and what they do is they'd rest one of these round bottom pots on the 3 points of contact and put firewood in from the side. The people in the area still do that, and I think it's impressive to watch them constantly adjusting. Instead of going to the range and adjusting the amount of gas or electricity there, they're turning the firewood and keeping the fire just right.
Here, in another structure, the team excavates a storeroom. Usually, archaeologists find only fragments of pots, but in Seren, huge vessels survive intact, protected for centuries by the soft ash. Amazingly, inside these vessels, the archaeologists find carbonized cacao seeds, squash, chilies, and beans.
Bingo.
The preservation at Seren is remarkable. Bit by bit, the team reconstructs the ancient Maya diet. In the storeroom, archaeologist Andrea Gersel measures the remains of a basket that once held corn.
Corn cobs have been found in dry caves where no deterioration takes place, and you get a lot of detail in those instances. But in tropical climates, you wouldn't expect to find any remains at all. The level of preservation here is excellent, and it's because the corn was coated by a layer of superfine ash. That superfine ash was moist and hardened into a shell around the corn, and then the corn rotted away, leaving a hollow space. When we fill that hollow space with dental plaster, we can recover all of the details of the corn cob, even though we can't touch the corn cob itself, the original corn cob. This area is incredibly lush. It's incredibly rich, and the variety of plants and foods, just wild foods that can be collected here today, is marvelous. I imagine 1,400 years ago the variety was at least as great. And so I don't think living here would have been very difficult at all.
It's touching the edge right here, so that's a good place.
At Seren, household members grew their own food and made their own tools, pottery, and clothes. We usually think of subsistence farming as difficult and impoverished, but the evidence emerging at Seren challenges these assumptions.
Quite frankly, we are surprised by the richness of material possessions in a fairly broad sense. Beautiful polychrome painted gourds, and the amount of food they had stored in the house is fairly impressive, and the range of foods. They're not just scrounging, not just sort of eking out an existence. They're really living quite well. It's a monkey tail, look at that.
From mouse bones to axe blades, the details of daily life preserved at Seren astonish the archaeologists. But it is only a beginning. It will take several seasons to excavate the remains of an entire household, and several decades to excavate the entire community. The community buried beneath the sugarcane of Seren may one day be unearthed. But other sites in the Maya region offer what Seren lacks, evidence of ancient households easily seen on the surface.
Mira, Arturo, 1, 2, 3 piedras. Por favor, corta por...
Here in Honduras, the survey team combs the Copan Valley. Their trained eyes recognize mounds of grass-covered stones as the remnants of ancient Maya dwellings.
Okay. Here's the road,
Mm-hmm.
like this.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where we came in, a small road. And we walked around this way, and we walked over into this pasture. And so this site He's right about here, right on this little hill.
The Copan Valley lies 100 kilometers north of Suren. In 1975, archaeologists began a complete survey of the valley on foot. After 10 years of painstaking work, they have discovered the remains of 4,500 structures.
Más a usted, 5 centímetros.
Archaeologist William Sanders has been leading excavations in the Copan Valley since 1980.
We decided to do a series of large-scale excavations out in the countryside to get an idea what the farming population was like, what kind of houses did they live in, what was their lifestyle like. Probably 80% of the population of Copan was in that social category.
Unlike Suren, the ancient houses of Copan have been exposed to centuries of erosion. Very few artifacts remain intact or in their original location. Still, the team finds significant clues. In one structure, the team discovers a raised platform of stone, the remnants of a sleeping bench. In another, they find evidence for a kitchen, shattered obsidian blades that once were knives, and broken pieces of pottery that were once used for cooking. The layout of ancient Maya houses is quite different from our own. The Maya constructed separate buildings for sleeping, cooking, and storing food. They organized these buildings around patios.
After 2 seasons of work up here, what can we say? Well, we have almost fully excavated a complete Maya settlement, which consisted of 2 adjoining patio groups of houses. We have 2 kitchens that are separated from the houses and 1 possible storage building. The social group here is clearly a larger one than the nuclear family, and the question is, what is the relationship among the members of those 4 nuclear families?
How do archaeologists reconstruct family relationships from the remains of kitchens and storerooms? To pursue his search, Sanders turns to the Maya of today. One 150 kilometers due north of Copan lies the tropical forest of Belize. Here, Martin Roche works with his son and nephew. Martin is a Kekchi Maya, one of dozens of Maya groups still farming the lands of Mesoamerica. Concepcion Roche, with her daughter-in-law Isabel, prepares the evening meal. They cook over a wood fire beneath a thatched roof, much the same way the 3-stone hearth was used at Suren 14 centuries ago. The Roche family is mainly self-sufficient. They teach their children and grow their food all within a short distance of the home. As in ancient times, daily life revolves around the household. Anthropologist Richard Wilk.
There's a lot of good reasons for people here to want to live in a multiple family household like this. There's a lot of jobs that have to be done every day, both by men and women, washing, hauling corn in from the field, cutting firewood. These kinds of things take time every day, and if you're off working in the fields, you can't do them. By having multiple family households like this, they can divide up the labor.
What can I say? It's a lot easier working together. Without a helper, life is much harder. Since we're at home, we can help each other, whatever happens.
The Roche family lives in 2 houses organized around a patio. Martine and Concepcion share a kitchen and sleeping room with their son, daughter-in-law, and grandchild. Across the way, another granddaughter lives with her husband and children. This is a classic example of the extended family household.
It's better working together than on my own. For food, for cutting bush, for planting corn, for fetching firewood, for everything.
As the extended family grows and changes, new houses may be built around the patio. New rooms may be added on. Relatives or others may come to live within the household.
Sometimes a person will live in 2 or 3 or 4 different kinds of household during their life cycle. If you look in even a single village, you see a whole variety of different households in any society, because people with different amounts of land, with different amount of resources, even different amounts of education, find different kinds of household arrangements suit their needs. And it's flexible on a generational basis. It's flexible on an individual basis.
Changes in household arrangements do not always come easily. A new bargain must be struck about who is going to do what to meet daily needs. Who will cook? Who will care for the children? Who will work in the fields? The answers usually turn on the definitions of men's work and women's work, work for the young and work for the old. But external pressures can force these roles to change.
It's not that men in the United States suddenly woke up and realized that they had to start cooking. And it was some sudden leap in consciousness. Instead, to me, what happened was that women were working more. And that if the household was going to have hot meals regularly, then men were going to start to change their behavior.
In every household, the division of labor is constantly changing. New members come and go. In a self-sufficient household like this one in Belize, there is but one constant. Are there enough people in the household to provide for daily needs? The Roche household is like millions of others around the world, pooling the labor of their extended family to survive. Their lives are a model for archaeologists interpreting the families of the past. The excavations in the Copan Valley revealed many clusters of houses surrounded by agricultural fields. Comparing today's Belize households to the archaeological remains, William Sanders believes that many of the ancient Copan residents also lived in extended families.
The advantage of this kind of organization is that there are a variety of work tasks that you can share. There are certain phases of the agricultural season, for example, where it's very important to do a job as fast as possible. For example, planting. You don't want to spread planting over a week. You want to get it done in 1 or 2 days. That means you have to mobilize labor. And if you're a poor peasant, how are you going to mobilize labor? Well, you share it. And you live together in that relatively close cluster of dwellings because it's more convenient to organize this type of labor. And it's based on kinship because these people have grown up together. They learned how to work together from children. And so it's the easiest kind of organization to have for that type of task.
Archaeologists believe that all but a small fraction of the ancient residents of Copan were farmers. At its height in AD 800, only 27,000 people lived in the Copan Valley. But what happens to households as the population increases, when a society is transformed from rural to urban? The Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Avenue of the Dead. These are the crowning achievements of Teotihuacan, one of the largest cities in all of the ancient world. At its height, as many as 125,000 people may have lived here. For nearly 1,000 years, between 100 BC and AD 750, Teotihuacan controlled the basin of Mexico. Today, much of the ancient city is covered by cactus and cornfields.